Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host this week. I'm stepping in for Davey Edgar. Davey's dealing with some personal family issues at the moment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show. But joining me to talk about a really disappointing performance, not just from Rangers in the first half, but from the SFA officials, as Rangers exited from the League Cup at the semi-final stage to Celtic 3-1 at Hampden yesterday afternoon. It's my very good friend and welcome back to the flagship, Alan Bradley. Alan, how is your temperature levels today after what was a pretty disappointing afternoon overall?
I think they're coming down a wee bit. Yeah, definitely disappointing. Angry as well. Fortunately, a year ago, all my kind of heart stuff and all that gets sorted out, Cammy, which was blooming just as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, lucky for you.
But no, we'll get into it all. But yeah, just disappointing, angry, and it'll become moaning Bradley. So apologies in advance, everyone. Yeah.
Alan, I want to kick off the flagship this week by saying that there'll be, I dare say, a few of our friends from across the city tuning in.
Yep.
So I'm going to kick off with a theme which they should be all too familiar with, and that is a horrendous decision by referee Nick Walsh not to send off Trusty. I'm going to, as we always like to be in Heart and Hand, you kind of look through the optic of parity and you want to see, decisions that go for you, against you. How would you like it if it was the other way around, etc., etc. So the three key decisions for me, and there was a few other, for me, relatively minor decisions in terms of how Nick Walsh stumbled his way through the game yesterday. But the three key decisions for me, first of all, the Asgard red card. He's studs high up after trying to control a ball, which was quite high up in the air. For me, is a red card. I've got to be honest. Again, if I think if it's the other way around, I'd be looking for a red. The defender comes in, looking to try and clear the ball. And whilst I think it's not about intention, Asgard is reckless, and that's exactly what happens. The second decision is the Rangers penalty, which was correctly awarded. However, as we have now found out in the aftermath, that there shouldn't have been a second booking because that rule apparently was removed a couple of seasons ago. So ex-officials who have went through some of these decisions have said that that's probably the correct one. I think Ralston could have got sent off at other points in the game anyway, but the most contentious one, which he got, not only him, but more so the VAR officials got horrendously wrong, was Trusty leaving the boot in on Jack Butland when the ball was on the ground, had been reclaimed by the keeper. And as much as some of our supporters might not want me to say this and might not like hearing it, there's a part of me that almost doesn't blame Nick Walsh for that decision, because that is the key reason as to why we have VAR in effect now. I've watched the replay back a number of times, Alan, and the thing that sticks out for me more than anything else is I've seen tackles like that happen before, where a player is trying to get to the ball. It's pretty frantic, and maybe he's just late getting in the keeper. This doesn't happen on this particular occasion. What actually happens is, as I say, Butland has control of the ball. He has it in his hands. Trusty readjusts his right leg and puts his studs across the top of Jack Butland's head. I think it was purposeful. I think it was designed. And the reason as to why I can almost forgo an in-play, real-time decision by Nick Walsh is because he probably thinks that Trusty's making a legitimate attempt for the ball, and he's maybe not seen the severity of it. And I also don't know if he's seen, from his angle, the adjustment of Trusty's leg to, as I say, leave it in. But this is why we have VAR reviews in play, so that when you look at circumstances like that, you should be able to make your mind up to it. Now, again, for anyone listening to this, I'm not going to stand here and say that Rangers would have went on and won the game had that red card been shown, as it should have been. Celtic would have had to play, 45 minutes plus 30 in a 10v10. And the way Rangers started the second half after an incredibly fearful start to the first half, I honestly couldn't tell you which way it would have gone. I'm not saying it was a guarantee, but at the same point, it would have made an exceptionally difficult job for Rangers easier, because it would have been a level playing field. Alan, that's my thoughts in a really quick summation. Where have you been at with everything that you saw unfold at Hampden yesterday?
Oh my goodness, well, yeah. We'll just take them individually. The Asgard one at the time, I was up in the kind of south stand upper, away from it, and from my distance, it was a kind of what's he doing? He's kind of put the ball over. There's obviously been the collision. I think from my point of view, it didn't look as if it wasn't an aggressive thing at all. What annoyed me, probably my blue tinted glasses as well, is the referee within seconds. I don't know, the red card, it couldn't have come out quicker. So in a way, it made me think, oh well, it must have been kind of violent or something's happened. I don't even think it was that, but I do accept that it's dangerous, and you can't really put your kind of foot up that way. I think he did make contact with him as well. So I absolutely, if it had been the other way, Cammy, I'd have been screaming, for the Celtic player, to get his red card. So I absolutely agree 100% with that one too. I think if we go for the Gers penalty one as well, no, I would agree that that was fine. So I think it was, it was right and proper that he did that one. I was a wee bit, should he get sent off as well? But I know there was this kind of double jeopardy thing. I don't know, but I knew it was the old, do they book him again or what? I don't know. So I'll kind of put that one to one side. The one that did it for me, though, was right in front of us, Cammy, looking down, it wasn't like a 50-50, he's going in, he's going to try and, he's going for the ball. It just looked naughty. There was a kind of, I don't know, it's just a kind of feeling, instinctively you just go, oh, that was absolutely, it was really a kind of naughty, dangerous thing to do. And again, immediately, Cammy, with me, it was right, well, looking back at the Asgard one, yeah, dangerous, whatever, fine, if that's the way it's gone, surely he goes off too. And I was expecting it. And when the yellow card kind of gets produced, again, I'm thinking, right, okay, he's given the yellow card, and certainly watching games, whether in England or wherever, it becomes, all right, they've kind of given the yellow, but if someone spots something in there, potential penalty or within that, and it could be dangerous, it will get overruled. And that was where I was really surprised, Cammy, because honestly, I thought it would just have been fair, just to, I read it that one too. I take your point too about the game, and I'm not saying for a minute that Rangers would win it. What I did find, and I think you touched on it, kind of fearful. I found in the first 20 odd minutes, we just looked scared. It was rabbit in the headlights. It was, I don't know whether a lot of them, obviously just the lack of experience, but we just weren't at the races. But second half, I thought the way we shuffled things about as well, I think all credit to them. I actually thought even 10 against 11, Cammy, I thought for most of the second half we were actually, the better side. And I definitely agree. If it had been 10 against 10, it would certainly made things a lot fairer. Other reason too, when it goes to extra time, if you've played for, I don't know, maybe half an hour or whatever already, in terms of with 10 men against 11, you're doing a lot more, giving a lot more effort, pushing and so on. Therefore, when it comes to extra time, the legs are going more. Where I think if we had both been 10, Cammy, from second half going on, then definitely I think that would have evened it up a wee bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, I mean, again, I'm not going to hide behind what has been horrendous refereeing decisions saying that Rangers are not going to make the League Cup final as a result of that. We can't afford, and we've been too guilty of this, across the course of the last few seasons, where we give away far too much time within a game before we start to settle into our stride. And you're right, Rangers started the game poorly. I think that there was definitely a fear factor initially from our players in terms of the occasion. And then laterally, that fear factor was exacerbated with the referee and his cohorts looking to be able to make decisions that ultimately were going to hurt Celtic. And that is definitely a factor. It is definitely something within their mindset where they feel, and listen, understand it, because they'll be under pressure, they'll be hounded if decisions are given against Celtic, that they could face victimization, they could face attacks in the street, they could be badgered at their places of employment. I understand it. It's a process that Celtic have employed previously via their fans and in the background via their club. about ensuring that if there is a big decision within an Old Firm game, you had better be 110% sure before you're willing to give it against Celtic. I think
Yeah.
Walsh probably knew himself that he couldn't recover that incident, and there was a spate of bookings for some of the Celtic players in the second half, which is, were correct. In some cases, there could have been 2 yellows shown to some players, but that's because Rangers were coming back into the game.
I think
Ultimately, though, Alan, this is where, and we'll touch on this in just a moment, Rangers cannot start games that poorly.
no,
And it
no.
wasn't, for me, they shouldn't feel overwhelmed by the occasion in terms of, these are, of course, big games, but there's been a recovery. There has been an upturn since Russell Martin left. And with Danny Rule coming in, I think that you've seen better performances against Kilmarnock and Hibs. Bran, I think, was too early for him, but you're now in a new lease of life, if you want to call it that way. So for the players to come out as timidly and as meek as they were, for me, I think, started to reverberate in the stands. There was a nervousness, I think, in the crowd. And as I say, Celtic were able to take the lead from a really poorly defended corner, again, systemic of what we've seen across the course of this season. So whilst I'm comfortable that there's definitely blame to be apportioned to the officiating, the first 45 minutes, I think, for us was almost as slow as slow to come out the traps as I've ever seen us.
Yeah, I will go back on the previous point, and then we'll get on to the game itself. What I've been watching Old Firm games since right through early 70s, right through. I've grown up with and we used to laugh. I used to go, geez, all this paranoia, it was always Celtic never get a decision, players never get picked for Scotland, all of that, the kind of backdrop. And at times it would be in my opinion, again, it was just a case of referees make wrong decisions and so on. I really didn't think there was agendas anyway, but that's probably just my kind of Rangers mindset. But as I say, decades and decades of that. And I'm reluctant to go down the route, but for goodness sake, for the past, I don't know, certainly for the past half a dozen years or whatever, there's so many, there's a whole list, Cammy, and as you say, particularly in Old Firm games as well, that seem to be these really strange decisions, are just wrong decisions, that go against. And I'm not going to go through it, but there's a good half a dozen I think we could all rhyme off. I think what annoys me even more about it is, even with VAR, and you'd think to yourself, look, well, once VAR comes in, think if mistakes are made, they'll be corrected. But it hasn't seemed to have kind of helped at all. Kind of trying not to lose my train of thought. So what's going to happen as well with VAR? You're expecting then, it's okay, it's going to go to that one, but it's not. The other one too is you end up getting decisions made, and then you suddenly find, hold on, 4 or 5 stages further down the line, something else has been spotted. And then you've now got this ludicrous situation where I think it's Willie Collum does the kind of VAR come, the posts looking back at where they've got things wrong. Again, all you get is, Rangers should have had a penalty. It was our mistake. Even the Hearts ones, Hearts shouldn't have had this goal. Okay, it was a mistake. Oh, Celtic get this penalty against Kilmarnock in 90 odd minutes. Here we go. Maybe it was a bit of a mistake. You're going to get the same again, potentially. Oops, hands up. Yeah, the guy should have been sent off at half time. And as I say, I really don't want to go down that route, Cammy, but do you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. It just seems to be continuing. I don't know how other clubs feel about it as well in other games, but specifically in Old Firm games, I think we all know. And okay, we always talk about the rub of the green, wrong term of phrase, but it'll go either way. But it doesn't seem to be, Cammy. I don't seem to be looking at plenty of ones where Celtic have had really decisions made against them, that have cost them goals, have cost them penalties. Anyway, big rant. Sorry about that.
No, listen, I agree
you know
with
what
you,
I
because
mean?
but I think, though, that you mentioned in there are definitely other clubs which are impacted by it. There's absolutely no doubt in my
Oh, and by the way, we never get points back, or we don't get a cup or anything when 2 weeks later they go, by the way, we screwed up here, guys. That's the thing as well. It's just mental.
100%. And I think, I think I said at the time, I said in the shows just immediately following the Hibs game, I think that we were still in the League Cup thanks to Lawrence Shankland, because he came out after the Hearts game and said, it was a handball.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it given for me. And then obviously you've got the Martin Boyle handball that was then correctly disallowed.
Yep.
And again, it just feels people will listen to this and go, "Yeah, there
I
is a
know, and
paranoia
I
to
don't
it."
want
Blah,
to.
blah.
I know.
But there's evidence to it, and the point I'm going to make there as well is that, especially when you talk about this country's showpiece fixture, which is the Old Firm games, even going back to the Czerny decision, where obviously we heard about the VAR audio, etc. We don't get any retribution, as you mentioned, as a result of that. And what probably angers me further with the situation, and if I go back to even the Julian offside goal that's won Celtic the cup,
Aye, yeah.
No VAR at that point, so I understand that. But if you look at it in terms of the current context, Scottish officials have got the best resources they've ever had in the history of the game in order to be able to help them make this decision. So whether or not, and this is not a VAR issue, by the way, because I know there's still some people who disagree with it, but fundamentally you can, and there is definitely a linear passage here in terms of some of the structure at Rangers, which we're going to talk about in a minute. You can have a structure and you can have resources and you can have tools, but if the wrong people are in place using those tools, then you are going to get errors. And ultimately, and I never want us to go down this route of intimidation that they did with referees, because I just don't think that we do that as a club. What I think Rangers have to do now, and where it has to be club-led, is they have to be able to start coming out and doing this on the front foot prior to these games and saying, we've had a number of decisions that have went against us, that ultimately the head of referees has then had to come out and apologise for. We hope that it will not happen again this weekend. Because even if I go back as far as the Diomande red card at Tannadice, that's a perfect opportunity, and as we probably should have done against Hibs, to come out and say these decisions are not been done correctly. The Diamande's red card gets overturned because, again, using VAR, it was wrong. It should have happened against Hearts. But we couldn't say anything against Hearts because then it would just be perceived as sour grapes. Same thing in terms of what we do, whatever Rangers decide to do with some sort of clarification from the SFA about what happened yesterday. You have to be able to come out and say these things after the fact. Once you've not exited a cup, once you've not dropped points, and say that decision's incorrect. And if it puts more pressure on referees, if it puts more pressure on Willie Collum and the SFA to get their house in order, then they have to do it, because this is the talking point now for this country's showpiece game, is a player kicked another player in the head and wasn't sent off. That's the takeaway from it.
And we're trying to attract people to come and sign for Scottish clubs and so on, and even people, players and so on, looking at this. Other wee one too, technology, Cammy, a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's got so daft now that you actually feel as if we should have a panel of VAR experts somewhere else, albeit USA, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, who are basically just told, by the way, guys, here are the games that you're going to be watching today, and you'll be online and you'll be looking at them, and then you can send me. You can actually VAR, because the state of our VAR team, even, Cammy, do you know what I mean? When it goes there and you're thinking that's fine, it's unbelievable. And it would take away as well a bit of it's this guy that's on VAR, or it's this team that's on VAR. But how long's it been in? It's only been in a couple of years, Cammy, and there's numerous ones. But as I say, I don't know. The club obviously have to not just come out with statements and so on, but in Scottish football, and it will be other clubs as well, we need to actually improve this, because it's just making, I think, our country more of a laughingstock in terms of Scottish football.
We've just passed VAR's birthday in Scotland. It was October 2022 that it came in. And as I say, we are still fumbling about with the whole premise.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, as I say, is pretty ridiculous. However, let's park that just now, because like I say, I think we could fill the whole pod with all these various different miscarriages of justice.
That was my part one. My part two, my part two is absolutely, I agree fully in terms of Danny Rowe. I think what he's come in, he's inherited what a mess, hasn't he? And I think the way the guy's carried himself and all of the evidence that I've seen today, okay, the one in Europe was far too early, but I think the guy has definitely shown he's got a bit about him. He is really intelligent. He can organise teams. he can change kind of tactics midway through and so on. So absolutely, I really think this guy, I think's made some difference. I think we saw it. The evidence is just even the Kilmarnock one. Were we not getting 20 odd chances and things previously against us, Russell Martin? You know, the limited chances that they had. The Easter Road one as well, which was even the old-fashioned way. It's away Easter Road. You just need to try and grind out. I think the way we all, worked as a unit and fought as well. And I think even, as I say, the second half, to be honest with you, in the Old Firm game. So in terms of my kind of view of Danny Rowell and that, I know it's early on, but I think he's done really well. And even at the time when people were going, shouldn't we go for him and so on, you don't get the job as a kind of assistant coach for the German national team and for Bayern Munich and, down to Southampton and do what he did. He's got far more credentials and far more than the other guy that they actually put in, So I just wanted to cover that in case it just came across as me moaning. But no, I'm fully behind, and I think we need to give that guy a lot of support, and we need to help him as well to improve the squad as well, Cammy. Yeah.
Well, the man primarily responsible for that, Kevin Thelwell, he's got work to do. And I think at this point in time, when you look at the quality of what we had on the park yesterday, a defence which struggles to keep Waynes out of close.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we lose a header, which by and large should never have been able to try and come in. And even prior to that as well, there was defensive calamities that I think that we managed to get away with. Obviously, Celtic did score through an offside, but it was correctly judged for offside. And then 2 minutes later, they managed to get their noses in front. There's a number of key players within that squad which give me massive concerns. Giga, I thought at times looked very, very ropey. I do give him some credit that he was clearly injured, was still able to play on for as long as he possibly could before he was eventually replaced. Migoma retreated into his shell, I think, yesterday. The big talking point is Chermiti and Majovski. And as I say, we're not here to say that the officials have put us out of the League Cup, because at the same token as well, Alan, the chances that Chermiti missed, there's two gilt-edged opportunities that he has to be able to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was naivety in my part or my eternal optimism to think that, when he scored for the Portuguese unders when he was winning international break, then he gets his goal against Kilmarnock. It takes that monkey off his back in terms of the goal drought. But now all of a sudden, he looks incapable of being able to do the basics, being able to win headers, being able to try and keep the ball under control and hold it for other players to come and support him. But the two chances he gets yesterday, it's harder to miss them than scoring, but somehow he was able to do it. Now, I've said for a long time, I cannot associate him with his cumulative transfer fees and what Kevin Thelwell has spent on him, which at this point is £23 million, to be able to then say he should be better for that. But our very own David Edgar said it in the post-match video after the game yesterday on our Patreon site. If he was a development player and he came through our academies, would send him on loan somewhere to be able to play at a slightly lesser level, to be able to try and build him up. We obviously cannot do that with him, because now effectively we're stuck with him. I want him to succeed. I think everyone listening to this of a Rangers persuasion wants him to succeed. Right now, he's given me zero indicators that that's actually going to happen. Majovski looks like the shadow of the player that he was when he was at Aberdeen. And I was personally really excited for Majovski coming in, because I liked him when he was at Aberdeen.
Yes, yeah.
Right now, he just looks so all over the place that Danny Rowell has got some big decisions that he's going to have to make in terms of what happens with some of these players. James Tavernier was, for me, our best player yesterday. Played in a number of positions because we had to do some shuffling, as you mentioned, and we're still talking about that in 2025. We've not been able to find suitable replacements for the guys who have left. And what really, really terrifies me more than anything else, Alan, is that Kevin Thelwell may have some of the money to spend that Andrew Kavanagh has said will be there in January. That window is 2 months away. And right now, given a look at what he's brought in, I wouldn't give this guy another 50p to spend, much less however much Kavanagh's going to give him.
No, I would agree. I mean, Danny Rowell probably know. I mean, he'll have looked, obviously, at the team even from the outset, and he'll know exactly. I mean, as I say, with all of the experience that he's had, we've picked up bits and bobs. He'll have loads of it. But no, I'd be really worried that suddenly he gets players thrust upon him that, quite frankly, he doesn't want. But you're right. I mean, even the Chermiti one as well. I know people were saying, "Oh, well, he did a bit better. He got in front. He kind of held up a couple of balls that didn't bounce off him." But those chances and so on, and to pay that amount of money, you could potentially get people in Scotland for, I don't know, several £100,000, by the way, that would do a better job than him. The Majowski one, I'm the same as you. For years when he was at Aberdeen, I'm going, what a player, because it would seem to me just getting one chance or so, and looked really good. At the start, when he came into us, we're going, well, nobody's giving him the ball. He's not really, he's not getting much. He probably got, in one hand, you could count the number of chances, but he's not getting himself into positions, and he just looks a shadow of himself. I thought positive, here we go. When you see the YouTube stuff, and everyone looks great in the YouTube. When I looked at the Mikey Moore one at first, and I spent a while talking to guys in the enclosure saying, by the way, this guy looks, you're really one of the best, that we could get. The way he was dropping shoulders, going by people like Gaza, he's got balance, strong upper body strength. Then for 4 or 5 games or wherever he played, it was just like, what did you watch, Alan? For the past few games, see where he's brought him on and he's put him in through that middle against the Kilmarnock, against obviously Hibs, and when he came on yesterday as well. What a cracking player he is. And obviously the manager spotted that now. So the likes of that, but there's so many, Cammy, in the team that it's a step down. It's just a kind of lesser, and I think it's to the manager's credit, as you say, that he actually got a tune, or he's managed to get them up to a certain standard. But if we really are serious, the owners as well, it's not that they suddenly give money to Thelwell. I'm like you, I really don't. Do you know what I mean? I really don't trust, that he would spend it wisely, Cammy.
I think the big issue here, and this is where, Stephen Gerrard came out and spoke in TNT Sports, Andy, about the reasons as to why he didn't take the Rangers job, and he had some questions around some of that, and he made mention that he felt that there was certain things that couldn't work, and whilst, as I said earlier on, this is where there's kind of linear paths between us, VAR, etc. as well, where the structure looks sound. It's the people who are operating within that structure is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Thelwell, we've just discussed. Patrick Stewart, whilst I don't think for for a single minute that he's going to win hearts and minds back over with the supporters, with being able to go after the SFA officials, he can start to lead the charge on based on some of that, which would give him a little bit more of a backbone in terms of what we're seeing at the moment. Kevin Thelwell to Snow, it feels as if his position's untenable for me in terms of what we saw yesterday, based on the guys that we had brought in that would ideally supplement and improve the squad. And aside from Mikey Moore, who, as I say, hasn't hit the ground running. He played better yesterday, and he was given plenty of space to operate in, and he did a lot of legwork, so I will absolutely give him the credit for that. But we're now at the stage where, even with just over, we're almost into double digits in terms of the league games played, these players, whilst I will give them a bit of leeway because of the Russell Martin design and how he wanted them to play, and I thought they would get better under Rule, and to a certain extent, Kilmarnock and Hibs are both been positive results. Yesterday, for me, what I was just really, really disappointed in was, again, this concession of time that we've given opposition, where we've written off 45 minutes of the game because we have not started well. We've been too fearful of the occasion, and fundamentally, what we need to do as a basic recruitment strategy is be able to say to players, this is a difficult atmosphere, and if you don't think that you can thrive in that, don't bother signing. You have to be able to look at these players in the eye and understand their character and say, you need to fully understand what's expected of you when you come here. You will have a high demand, but that's been part of this institution. And when it comes up to games against Celtic, you have to be able to stand up. You have to win your individual battles. You have to be able to make sure it's high tempo and high energy. It's all about being able to do those things that a player you should have at your core. I think that, based on, you had Guardiola managing Rangers yesterday, and if these players still cannot find the inner emphasis, the inner passion and desire to turn up from the first whistle, then you're on a hide into nothing, because I've seen us, and you've seen us in recent history get battered off Celtic teams.
Yes,
the qualities, were simply different levels because of the situation that we were in. But at the very least, the bare minimum is be up for it. And if you can't do that for a League Cup semi-final against your biggest rivals, then frankly, you don't deserve to be at Ibrox.
Yeah, and don't come here as well, Cammy, going, I'm kind of going to Rangers, and I've seen all these old firm games, and my next move is England or wherever, I want to move. You've got to show you're not a wee boy. You shouldn't get thrown about. Ali McCoy said that the mentality of some of them, they are like wee boys against men. This is where if you really want to put yourself in the shop window, ultimately, you come there, you go to these big games, you impose yourself, you show, you stand up. You don't get, you win second balls and so on. You be really aggressive and so on. People will then take note and go, here, I fancy that. Don't go on there and suddenly become all kind of, oh, I'm sort of scared and I'm going to pull into myself and I really don't want to do that. You've blown it. You've actually got so many eyes on you now for the Old Firm game from England and from all these other people. That's the one place to do it. And as you say, if you can't do it, well, away you go. I think what frustrates me as well, I've said it before, there'll be guys in our domestic league that you could pick a handful of them and you could put them into our team. They're used to playing at Parkhead, they're used to playing at Pittodrie, whatever it would be. They would do better, they would stand up, and it's just frustrating. You talk about Rothwell as well. He's like a 29 or a 39-year-old guy, whose legs have gone. Aaron's no really. You could go through them all, and I don't mean to just kind of pick them and run them down, but they've not showed any evidence. And I do think when they've done the due diligence as well, the first thing you should be doing, Cammy, we all know it. What mentality has the guy got? Is the guy aggressive? Is he up for a fight? Okay, ultimately you need the quality, but if you don't win in Scottish football, if you can't do that, it doesn't matter if you're going to St Mirren, Fir Park or whatever, you're not going to succeed, and I think that's where I think Thelwell's got it wrong. They've underestimated coming up here. Yeah, we just got to Scotland. It's like the Joey Barton thing and all that. Yeah, it's no bother and we'll bring people. They underestimated the task and what you really need in terms of qualities. Therefore, when it comes to January as well, we can't just have, a repeat of that. If anything, go for people with, I think, a lot more physicality, with the ability, get some more Scottish people in as well, Cammy. And, we've turned our nose up, by the way, a number of good Scottish footballers through the years. Oh, no, he's no really Rangers class and so on. We need to go back. Europe's real important to us financially, but quite frankly now, we need to get back to our bread and butter now. And we need to go back and we need to win. We need to get back in here. We're only 5 points behind Celtic in the league. Do you know what I mean? You can go on a run now, but we need to change it. And I'm sorry, but Thelwell, and Lord knows if it's his son that's helping in terms of the scouting, for goodness sake, Cammy, do you know it?
Well, I think it's an interesting point you bring up about the league, because if you look at yesterday in terms of that approach, as much as we've criticised what's happened in the first half, in the second half, Rangers absolutely grew into the game.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you say, it wasn't a complete write-off. We're not sitting here discussing a 4-0 hammering from Celtic. Rangers, and again, I think the optic of the game completely changes if it's 10v10 because of the way how Rangers performed in the second half. Because despite having to cover the extra ground, Celtic were quite happy, I think, at points in the second half.
Just using the space and moving.
They wanted to use the space. They wanted to be able to get their men forward, to be able to pass the ball about in the horseshoe from the back, to make sure that, our players had to go and run and cover extra distance. And again, like you say, it's not all necessarily the criticism of the players who then decided at half-time that, right, we can still salvage something from this. Now, if Celtic had got a second goal in the first half, I think that the game's over as a contest. Yeah. But there was still something to be able to salvage.
And there was a lot more fight as well in the second half, so I'll give them that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So that's why, if I could take a positive from yesterday, you mentioned there as well what we have to be able to do now from a recovery perspective, both domestically and on the European front as well. My own personal opinion, because I know you just mentioned it there regarding the gap between us and Celtic, is only 5 points. Obviously, it's significantly different between ourselves and Hearts,
Yes,
because
yeah.
you know, again, Hearts have had a brilliant start to the season. So you know, ultimately, as things stand to now, they are continuing on that run. We're obviously 14 points behind them, but my gut feeling tells me that they will then start to slip. So what Rangers effectively have to do is now start to maintain a degree, then maintain a degree of consistency and be able to try and build some momentum. If we can do that across the course of the next 2 months, then it starts to give us some encouragement within that as well. And you look at the second half yesterday, extra time was incredibly difficult because, like I say, I think there was a lot of players who were dead on their feet because they had exerted themselves through necessity because of the man disadvantage. But if you take that and you, again, like I say, look at Hibs and Kilmarnock in terms of the overall performance and not just the results, then I think, like I say, there's definitely some signs there that things can happen. What I want us to be able to look at being able to do then is, if we can build up those momentum with the running games that are going to be across next month in December as we hit into the tail end of the year, whatever happens in the January window, and we can't even begin to guess on that or speculate at the moment, because a lot of things could change over the next 8 weeks. If Thelwell leaves, if someone else comes in, if someone then at the board level says, I am going to ratify all signings from now on to ensure that we've done our respective due diligence, okay, fair enough. But what Danny Rule can do now is he can then start to build on some of that whilst taking the players with him on that journey.
He's a really intelligent, articulate guy as well, Danny Rowe, and each time he's watching, he's getting more of an insight into, you know, the strengths and weaknesses of the players and so on. You can tell that. And even yesterday as well, all that stuff that go on, that in itself will begin in as well. So I'm confident as well that he'll be learning more around. And as you say, if we can get some element of consistency now, you know, and certainly domestically, you know, moving forward, yeah, it's not all lost at all. And then he can then feed that into his wish list and so on. But they just need to get it right at the top as well now, Cammy, don't they?
Yeah, and they have to get it right. And ultimately, whilst I think Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart, I think their positions are untenable at the moment. I think Thelwell, if he does not have a successful window going in the assumption that he's here in January, I think he has to walk. I would like to see him go now, but I think he absolutely has to walk if he cannot get it right within the next window. But Alan, let's turn our attention briefly to Thursday night's game, as Rangers are back in Europa League action. Only the small matter of being able to take on Roma.
I know.
Yeah, Roma have not had a great start. They're currently sitting 23rd in the Europa League table. They've had one win in their Europa League campaign so far, 2 losses. So at this point in time, they'll be very disappointed about how they've started with it. Ultimately, this is where Danny Rule has to be able to say to these guys, you came to this club because you're going to be able to play in, you know, a major European competition.
Yeah. Yes.
Roma are top tier competition. So you have to look at this now as a challenge, as an opportunity. I think the players need to ensure that, again, from an individual perspective, they're taking accountability for what they're delivering. However, this isn't 3 or 4 years ago where you would have looked at this going, yeah, I'm confident that we could do something on a Thursday night at Ibrox. This is going to be a tough game given where this team is at the moment. Roma, again, like you say, they've not had a great start. They've probably had games that they would have liked to have been able to win against Nice against Lille and against Pilsen. So they'll be looking for something as well. But Rangers have to look to being able to recover whatever they possibly can within this Europa League campaign.
I think it's a kind of win or bust for us. I think we do have to win, Cammy, and as you say, to try and get ourselves moving up the table. And the frustrating thing as well is even the team who are decried last season, it's not that. I would actually have felt quite confident with the team that we had last season going into, you know, Thursday's game. In fact, the previous European games this season as well, we'd probably been sitting on, I don't know, 9 points or whatever it would be, you know. But no, this has to be, and that's absolutely right. It's the same as you're in there, you're playing in the Old Firm games, these high-profile ones. Well, there's a classic example. It's against Roma too. It's in Europe. They've got to do it. They've got to concentrate. And Ibrox under the lights, we do know, don't we? You know, it can if we can get off to a good start, and linked to what you said earlier on, let's not be 1-0 down, Cammy, after, several minutes. Let's actually take it to them, get that early start, and get Ibrox rocking, and let's see how it goes from there.
Maybe it's just a case now of we say, look, this is proper European level opponents, and you've dropped points against teams that, frankly, you should have absolutely been able to wipe the floor with. So it's not a free hit, and I don't mean to dispel it and such as that. We've got some good news in the fact that Dibiala is going to be out, which will be a miss for Roma. He took an injury in their last game against AC Milan. But irrespective of that, this is where the players that we've discussed, the individuals that we've discussed, they need to be able to step up to the mark. Chermiti, for example, should he start on Thursday night, he is not going to get the same amount of chances that he's had in recent games. He has to be more clinical. Mm-hmm. I personally think that, assuming that he does start Chermiti, he's going to have to say to him, look, there is a lot of responsibility on you, that not necessarily that you have to finish every chance that comes your way, because I think that's too tall an order, but in order to do the basics better, holding the ball up, winning your headers, being physical and what you have to do. And I would almost repeat exactly the same instruction from Miovski should he feature as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's even a case of just hit the target. Do you know what I mean? As you say, if we can take chances, hit the target, put in something decent. But no, you're right. I don't know Danilo. I don't know if he'll be involved or what, Cammy, or... But I noticed, Stephen, the ball kind of bouncing off him as well. They just need to be... It is that basics again, isn't it? I think defensively, we've done a bit better, haven't we, doing at times just clearer lines, put it out, go back and square up and so on. I think the same as from the guys at the front as well, because the way that we do play, it does need to stick to then allow our midfielders and so on to kind of come up with them. So, but they should see it as a big opportunity. They still they have a chance, haven't they, really, to actually show. Maybe they'll feel as if they shouldn't get the criticism that they have been getting. But what do you do? If you've got the right mentality, it just becomes right, we'll watch this. And that's it. It comes down to that kind of mentality, doesn't it? And they've got to do it. They've got to do this, Cammy, and kind of show their worth, really. And a really good stage to do it on, yeah.
No, 100%. I totally agree with that. Well, listen, that will do us for this week on Flagship. I'll be back with you at the end of the week on Friday, unpacking that Roma game and looking ahead to Sunday's game against Dundee at Dens Park, which should be very interesting. So looking forward to being able to discuss that more with you when the time comes. Last thing for me to do is to thank your executive producers, Mike Lee, Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening. And thank you to our very special guest, Alan. You've been an absolute stalwart of the Flagship and Extra shows, my friend. It's been great to have you back on, buddy.
No, it's been good to go on. Apologies to everyone for my moaning and my ranting and so on. Although I think Margaret will probably be quite pleased. She'll go, that's good, rather than Alan going on tonight about it. I'll probably put it on your shoulders. But again, thanks for the invite. I've enjoyed it, and really just onwards and upwards now, Cammy, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing for me to do, folks, before I wrap up the Flagship, the reason why I am covering it today is because across the weekend, our very own David Edgar had some family issues. His dad, Tom, took unwell and had to be taken into hospital, and David was kind enough to share that on his post-match video from yesterday. He wasn't able to make the game, again, due to those circumstances, which is absolutely understandable. And I'd just like to say from myself, Alan, the Podders, and I'm sure all of you listening, we wish Tom a very, very speedy recovery. David has asked me to say thank you to you all who commented on the video to pass on your best wishes. It's very much appreciated by the whole Edgar family, and I'm very sure that Tom will be back on his feet very shortly, because a nicer man you could never meet. And as I say, hopefully the wee man is back up and into his usual joyful self.
Yeah, here, agree. Yep.
That'll do us for this week, folks. As I say, I'll be back with you on Friday. If you want to get any more of our coverage, please head on over to our Patreon site, patreon.com/Heart and Hand, and you'll get all the build-up for the Roma game as well. And we'll be able to speak to you at the end of the week. Thanks so much, everyone. But thanks for listening. Bye-bye.